that last bit again. You've forgotten what we said about the abolition of the scrums.
Yeah, about the.
I was
well,
momentarily. Yeah.
We must have both been on that show.
Yeah, we were, because we discussed about how it does seem a bit crazy if you're constantly making tackles, yet, having your head in a scrum is deemed to be so much more dangerous. But on the other hand, if the medical evidence is that, then I suppose, you go with it. And whether they are just using this as a trial for getting rid of scrums permanently.
I mean, it gives us the opportunity to trial it, even if it's not the intention, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, this is it. I think that's what we sort of came out of the last discussion saying, really.
The RFL has also announced a simplification of the regulations regarding nationality and the limit of players who are not federation trained by supporting the removal of the quota rule at all levels. This means that at the Super League level, the only restrictions will be that clubs may employ a maximum of 7 non-federation trained players. So basically it removes the distinction between non-federation trained players and Australian/New Zealand players. Effectively, so it stops people having to fuss around to get passports for
their Maltese grandparents.
Yeah, for either Colpack or EU nations, doesn't it? And possibly kind of something that might be linked to that simplification as well is elsewhere the board supported the adjustment of the RFL's governing body endorsement requirements following Brexit, meaning that from the 1st of January 2021, new players with EU passports other than UK passport holders or those with an existing right to work in the UK will have to obtain a GBE, that's a governing body endorsement, to be signed by clubs. This includes the ability to base an application on appearances for any IRL member and removing the requirement for players moving from Catalans and Toulouse to have met the requirements when joining those clubs. The RFL says that the changes have been agreed with the UK Visas and Immigration Office. So, obviously, leaving the EU meant we had to come up with a different sort of system, and a lot of the non-federation trained players that were kind of off quota were players that tried to find EU passports and stuff, and now that right to work has been removed, so we have to come up with something else. So in a way, I'd sort of combine the two as finding a simple solution to make sure we can keep signing players.
Yeah, no, I think we had to get some clarity, didn't we? So or some ruling about it. So I guess, it's good to have actually got something nailed on in place.
Yeah, with 6 months to go as well, which is better than other areas of the economy. Super League's restart in August could be under threat because of player unrest over continued pay cuts, says Warrington prop Mike Cooper. Speaking on the Mickey and Woody Show, an online programme hosted by former Warrington players Paul Wood and Mickey Hyam, Cooper said, "I think there are only 3 teams who have agreed what their pay is going to be. So they're talking about us playing in 2 weeks and they're I think he means training in 2 weeks, and there are only 3 clubs that have agreed to return to training. As it stands right now, there is no competition." So this is a real fear, isn't it? This is a scary story that's the case. The 12 Super League owners had a tacit agreement to continue pay cuts of between 10 and 15% introduced when the season was suspended and income streams began to dry up until the end of 2020. But BBC understands that at least one club, Hull FC, have agreed to pay their players in full from October at the latest, and that has led to unrest amongst players at other clubs who want similar deals. The issue has been added to the agenda of a Super League meeting on Wednesday, with several owners and chief executives believed to be frustrated by Hull FC's unilateral stance.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I mean, Hull are leading the way on coming to agreements with their players, but out of step with the other owners. I would say it's not necessarily a bad thing that Hull have come out of step, because we all think the players should be paid fairly, and as soon as they can be paid in full again, then they should be paid in full again. And I think if Hull can demonstrate to the other clubs how they've managed to afford this level of pay cut, because obviously what we're talking about is the other clubs want to take more money off the players, don't they?
Yeah.
Then that's helpful, isn't it? And then everyone can sort of work towards the same script, you would hope.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's quite nice for once for, Hull to be leading the way in good stuff, I feel. But, yeah, I think having seen all the issues that, players have talked about, it is good to see that at least, there is an understanding that Hull will be paying their players properly and in full.
But what about the fear sort of suggested by the statement of, as it stands right now, there is no competition? I mean, Hull and the other two clubs that appear to have come to agreements, who we're not sure who those clubs are, but we know that Warrington and Hull KR... No, we don't know. Sorry, we don't know. It's been speculated that Warrington and Hull KR are two of the clubs sort of at the other end of the scale on this that are further away from coming to agreements, and that's worrying because Hull KR play the first weekend, so they need to get back in training. They're meant to be starting training a week today as we record this, and that's I mean, are you worried, or do you think all these things will be ironed out?
I suspect it will be ironed out. I mean, you expect, given that it's, Cooper's saying this, you feel that therefore his club is definitely one that hasn't come anywhere near coming to any sort of agreement, don't you?
Yeah, you certainly do, yeah.
I mean, are the players trying to, start holding their clubs to hostage a bit, do you think?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? The players
coming out with a statement of, because actually, is it that, Hull have agreed from October to pay their players in full, but why is there no Super League? Why is it that this...
Why is there no consensus across the board, yeah?
So they've got to finish negotiating deals with players, right? And they can't return to training until then.
Well, the players could refuse to return to training, but I'd find that surprising. I would imagine, even with the sort of pay cuts that have been agreed, once they're off the sort of furlough 80% situation, that's capped, of course, as well at $3,500 a month, which will impact the medium and higher earners in Super League, won't it? Then they're going to receive more money anyway from being back, so I think the clubs are banking on that. But one of the things as well is the clubs can't use any of the loan money to player wages. So to some extent the club's hands are tied, but to some extent the players have already sacrificed here. And if there's clubs signing more players, Wigan are signing John Bateman. Obviously, there's people going off the cap at Wigan that he's taking the place of, like the likes of potentially O'Loughlin and Lulawai, and then other people that might be leaving, like Hastings and Gildart. Joe Burgess is probably going and stuff like that. But you can break those conversations down at all the clubs. Saints have signed James Graham. They've just brought him in. He can't be cheap, although Luke Thompson's gone. So there's a gap to fill in the cap. But other players will be seeing a player come in and thinking, well, you could have just not signed him and paid me my money.
Yeah. It's again, it's another one of those where you can see arguments on both sides. I think I'm just more shocked than anything else that Hull are the one that are, getting on with it. I think this is my actual, thing that's really
you were like the club that was meant to be the poorest at the start of all this.
Yeah.
That was the rumours, weren't it?
Yeah. Well, and we've taken the hit the same as everyone else, and I don't think that Adam Pearson has quite as much money as, he once did.
Yeah.
And the other thing that surprises me is, us and Rovers aren't doing the same thing, because normally, what Pearson does, Hudgell does.
It's really, it's so complicated. I remember when we went through all the different options not all the different options, but what was reported as the different ways that the clubs had done the pay cuts and stuff. And even then, they were quite they were further apart than I thought they would have been then. And this is why we actually... One thing I think, if the players push it too much now and damage the potential of a resumption, in a way, there's an element of cutting off the nose to spite the face in terms of if there's no competition, there's no clubs, there's no jobs.
Yeah, and there's definitely no payments.
Yeah, but then at the same time, they've got to position and posture a bit to get what they deserve in terms of their place at the table for these things going forward, to get the proper, like, players' say on the way players are paid.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about issues about who gets the most money. We're talking about the players being able to put back in place a position where there's a minimum salary. The players being able to have a say on player welfare matters. Those sorts of things. So the players need to maneuver their position to get that strong hand going forward in the future.
Yeah, they need to pick their battles.
The season. Yeah,
they can't fight every. Well, they can fight every perceived injustice, but they have to be careful because, otherwise it just becomes, oh look, the players are complaining again.
Yeah,
and they'll lose favour with the fans.
True. Yeah, true. Because there's a lot of fans who don't get paid as well as the players get paid.
Yeah.
As well, even though the players don't get paid as much as we all think they deserve to get paid. Yeah, complicated situation. We're kind of really sat in the middle on this one, aren't we? In terms of seeing it both ways, like not sat in the middle, but going from one side to the other almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is the thing, isn't it? You can see, that clubs have to be careful because we don't want to see any more of them going to the wall. And ultimately, if a player goes to a club goes to the wall, then that's how many people out of a job.
Yeah.
And how many players have got something else to go to. So actually then they'd be without a job and without anything.
Mike Cooper's got something else to go to, though. Have you seen those absolutely beautiful 1895 sports jerseys for the Holland Rugby League or Netherlands Rugby League?
I haven't, but obviously I chatted to him, didn't I?
Yeah. So
I heard all about his business. I wonder if he's furloughed staff.
I suppose he's had to.
Sorry, that was completely random. I was just thinking, I wonder.
I mean, I've got less of an answer to that than I had about the Toronto Wolfpack being in a formal partnership with the UK government.
I'll drop him a message and ask him.
Right. Okay, excellent. Well, I should do that. We'll take a quick break and then we'll move into match reviews. Intra NRL match reviews, where it was round 8. Was it round 8? It was round 8 down under. We start with the main event, don't we? Last Thursday's game, it was a big game. In fact, before we do that, let's do a bit of a disclaimer. We didn't watch between us a hell of a lot of the action this weekend. I watched the Storm Roosters game. I watched the Raiders game. George Williams getting his first try. And I watched the second half of two of the other games, and I watched a bit of the Bulldogs Rabbitohs game. So there is going to be some gaps here, because I know that you only managed to watch one of the games as well, Sarah. So there is going to be gaps here, guys.
But at least our games didn't overlap the ones we watched.
There you go, yeah. And neither of us watched the Seagulls versus the Knights, I think. I might have seen the last 10 minutes, that one. I had a very weird sleep pattern this weekend, which meant early games were not the way to go, and trying to catch up as well after work didn't work out great for me either on Friday after. Well, actually, it did. I watched the Raiders game. I just wasn't able to watch the other one. So, Thursday, anyway, the main event, the big game, the game loads of people were looking forward to last week, and it delivered. The Storm 27, the Roosters 25, after a penalty from Cameron Smith in Golden Point. No, on the hooter. No, in Golden Point. Was it Golden Point?
I don't know, Mark. You carry on arguing with yourself.
And it was in Golden Point.